Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching online. We are here again, Jamaica House of Prayer. We're continuing our study in the end times. We have been looking at the positive and the negative trends. Well, we're looking at positive and negative trends in the end times. And we have already done 2 sessions on the positive trends. These sessions are geared towards encouraging the brethren as we enter into times of testings and trials and increasing difficulties in the world. It is important for us to be forearmed with knowledge. There's a saying that says, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And in Luke chapter 16, Jesus said, concerning the things he was telling his disciples about that had to do with future events, he said that I'm telling you these things before they happen, so that when they actually do happen, you will not fall away. And so there is that kind of potential that exists, that men will fall away, or there's a potential of men falling away, men and women, of course. I'm using the term generically. So men and women will fall away in cases where they are ignorant of what is taking place, they're ignorant of what is about to take place, and so they become disillusioned, and some people actually fall away. So we want to study the scriptures and understand for ourselves what are the things that will actually take place. So I'm going to be dealing with the negative, primarily with the negative people and events in the end times. Now, if you did not hear the teachings on the positive trends, hearing this teaching might be a bit discouraging for you and frightening for some people. But the truth is that all of what we are teaching is designed to prepare and to encourage the believer, especially to inform the unbeliever, and to, I trust, bring the unbeliever into faith in Jesus Christ. Now, some reasons I'm going to just give very, very briefly as to why we need to study the end times. We need to study the end times, or I might use a stronger word, we must study the end times, because the generation in which the Lord returns is the most dramatic generation in human history. And it will contain 2 great extremes. Before the Lord returns, that is before Jesus returns, the nations will witness the greatest revival and the most severe pressures that anybody would have ever seen, mankind would have ever seen. These pressures are going to include God's judgments on the earth, Satan's rage being displayed, man's sin being fully displayed during this time also. Another reason for studying the end times is that because the generation in which the Lord returns is the most written about generation in the scriptures. That end time generation, there are more scriptures talking about that generation than any other generation in the Bible. So there are more than 100 chapters in the Bible that have the end times as their main theme. One other reason that we need to study the end times is because the scriptures regarding the subject actually reveals Jesus' heart and his leadership. So we need to know his heart. We need to understand his leadership as it is revealed in the scriptures. The scripture actually says in Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to show his servants things which must shortly take place. So we need to study the scriptures that we might understand things that are actually going to take place, things that may not be happening in the present situation that we may be living in, but things that are going to come to pass. Jesus used the word shortly take place. Interesting that he said this 2,000 years ago. So God's understanding of the word shortly and soon is evidently a little bit different than ours. But we must study the end times because the generation in which the Lord returns is the one generation that God has chosen to reveal with prophetic signs that increase in intensity as we get closer to the coming of the Lord. Matthew chapter 24 makes reference to the time of the coming of the Lord and the time leading up to the coming of the Lord as a time that is described like a woman in labor, that she begins to have birth pains. The birth pains or the birth pangs increase as the time of delivery draws closer. So in the world, there's going to be an increasing measure of difficulties and hardships that will increase as the Lord's return draws closer. So we want to be aware of these signs. They include prophetic signs, supernatural signs in the heavens, trends in society, trends in the political arena, the military arena, the religious sector, science, technology, and in the economy of the nations. And God calls it wisdom for us to understand what is actually taking place. So what we're dealing with is not merely a curiosity with respect to end-time events, because we're dealing with issues here that relate to life and death. And so the scriptures require those who are living at the time when Jesus is about to return to know how to prepare itself accordingly. So there is the ability, we can know the times, we can know the season. We may not and we will not know the day or the hour, but we can know the season in which Jesus will return. And so Jesus and the Apostle Paul actually emphasizes the knowability of the prophetic signs of the end times. You read Matthew chapter 24, 32 to 34, Luke 21, 25 to 29, and you will see these things. What I want to do now is to just give us a little review of what is going to be the positive sign trends, and then I'm going to be looking at the negative sign trends. So I'm going to be doing this quite quickly. If you didn't get to hear it before, you can go online and you can look for the End Time Teachings by the Jamaica House of Prayer by Ricardo Huslin. He did the first two, and he dealt with the positive sign trends. Now, I'm going to be dealing with the negative sign trends, but I want us to keep in mind or to be aware of the positive sign trends. Now, the day of the Lord is coming, and there are two extremes related to Jesus' return, right? The day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it? It says in Joel chapter 2, verse 11. And in Malachi chapter 4 and verse 5, I will send you Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So the great day of the Lord has in this word, great day, refers to the unusual events, positive and negative, that will escalate in the final 3.5 years before Jesus actually returns. So the Lord wants us to be aware of these things, and the positive sign trends will include the greatest revival and outpouring of the Spirit in history, and it is going to result in the Church of Jesus Christ being a victorious church in the earth, full of the glory of God. You can read that in Ephesians 4, verse 13, Ephesians 5, 26, 27, Matthew chapter 16 and verse 18, along with other scriptures. So, this great revival is going to include miracles, that were seen in the book of Acts, combined with miracles that we saw in the book of Exodus, right? So it's miracles related to healing of sick bodies, but you're going to see miracles related to nature and God doing miracles in nature, as we saw in the book of Exodus, with things like the parting of the Red Sea and, stuff like that. The ingathering of souls. There's going to be a tremendous ingathering, a great ingathering of souls that will possibly be over 1 billion people. But there's going to be a great ingathering. Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, Revelation 5, verse 9, Revelation chapter 7, verse 9 and 14. It says, a multitude that no one could number of all nations, people coming out of every tribe and nation as they come out of great tribulation. So we can expect that. The other thing that you will see, one of the other things that you will see, is that there will be great supernatural provisions that God will release to his people during this time. This is one of the positive things that we can look forward to. God will manifest his provision like he did in the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt. In Micah chapter 7, verse 15, it speaks of this. As in the days when you came out of Egypt, I will show great wonders. And so, great wonders like those will be seen at the end of the age. As the people of God journeyed through the wilderness, they were provided for. And this, I believe, we can expect during our time, or the time of pilgrimage at the end of the age. God caused food to fall from the sky. He brought water from the rock, etc., etc. It will be a time when these things are going to be needed. Right? So those are some things, some supernatural things that we know are going to take place. There will be cities of refuge, pockets of mercy, where God's people are going to be protected from God's judgment, which is going to be poured out during that time. We're going to see God coming back to establish his millennial kingdom as the ultimate prophetic work of the Lord in the earth as he sets up his kingdom. Matthew chapter 6, verse 10, we are to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is going to actually take place on the earth. The next stage of the Father's plan is for Jesus to rule as a king on earth for 1,000 years. It is referred to as the millennium, and you can read that in Revelation chapter 20, from verse 4 to 6. And it says in Revelation chapter 20, verse 6, they shall be priests, that is the people of God, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So the Lord will rule from Jerusalem in perfect righteousness and continual peace as he restores the earth to the conditions that existed in the Garden of Eden. We're going to see the rapture of the church being caught up to be with the Lord when he returns. It is not going to be a secret event. It is going to be a dramatic event witnessed by all believers and unbelievers. Every eye shall behold him. And so we prepare for that. So those are some of the positive trends. Now I'm going to be looking at negative trends, people and events in the end times. As I said before, it is a really, really challenging time that the world is going to face at the end of the age. I want to preface what I'm going to be getting into by saying that the book of Revelation, that book that so many people are afraid to read because of the things contained therein that have to do with judgment and destruction and death, that book is not primarily a book to frighten us. In fact, it is called the book, it is the revelation of Jesus Christ. It is a book that the writer actually promises that those who read it would receive a blessing. It is designed actually to encourage the church, not to discourage, but to encourage the people of God. If we are outside of the body of Christ, then these things are going to be very, very discouraging because it speaks of devastating times of death and destruction. Okay, so we're looking at the negative trends that we can expect to see as we enter into this time of the preliminaries that have to do with the return of Jesus Christ. I'm going to read two scriptures again. I read them already, but I'll read them again as we start this. It is Joel chapter 2, verse 11. and Malachi 4 and verse 5. Joel chapter 2 verse 11 says, "For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it?" Malachi 4 verse 5, "I will send you Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord." So the great day of the Lord is referring to the unusual events that I said already, positive and negative, that will escalate in the final 3 years before Jesus returns. It is his day, right? And the reason why it is referred to as his day is because Jesus acts in the earthly arena in great power for his people and against his enemies. He's going to openly show himself as that warrior king who aggressively confronts sin in the earth. So, this twofold nature of the end times is going to be seen in the blessings that the redeemed are going to experience and in the judgment for those who refuse to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior and Lord. And so if you're listening to me and you have not bowed your heart to the Lord, I would encourage you to give your heart to Jesus Christ. There's a time coming when any unbeliever is going to be in great, great distress because of what is going to be coming upon the earth. But God has made a way for men to escape the wrath of God that is going to be poured out upon the earth. So it is going to be a very terrible day to the rebellious who witness the most severe. They are going to be witnessing the most severe outpouring of God's judgments that the earth has ever seen. You read Revelation chapter 6 to chapter 20, and you see the relating of such things there. So the Lord's judgments are going to shake everything in the earth that can be shaken. You see that in Haggai chapter 2, 6 to 8, and Hebrews chapter 12, verse 26. It speaks of the earth being shaken. Everything that can be shaken is going to be shaken, and men are going to face a very, very difficult time during this period. The nations are going to be experiencing wars that, Jesus spoke about in Matthew chapter 24. Nations will rise against nation, ethnic groups, that is, against ethnic groups, nation against nation. And these things are going to increase as we draw nearer to the end of the age. The nations of the earth are going to be in convulsions, convulsing as God's judgments are being poured out. I know that many people would rather not speak of the judgments of God. It is not popular to talk about the judgments of God. People are discouraged by it, and some people even seem to get upset when we talk about God actually judging. But this is what is very, very clear when you read in the book of Revelation, that there is a very terrible time of judgment that is coming, and it is referred to as the Great Tribulation. Matthew chapter 24, 15, verse 15 and 21 and 22. Let us read it. It says, "There will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever shall be, unless those days were shortened. Then it says, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So the terrible day refers to the most difficult time in history, referred to as the Great Tribulation. It describes the negative aspects of the final 3.5 years before Jesus actually returns. The pressure that is going to be upon the nations will come from 4 main sources. The first source of the tribulation is actually God's anger. More aptly put, God's wrath. It says, for by the wrath of God on the rebellious, the wrath of God is going to be poured out in great measure. And it is going to be seen, if you read Revelation 6-20, you will see 7 seals, the seal judgments, 7 trumpet judgments, and the 7 bowls of wrath that are poured out upon the earth. The second of the 4 sources of great pressure is the rage of Satan. The Bible speaks about Satan coming down to the earth in great rage. And he is going to persecute the saints through the person who is referred to as the Antichrist. During his reign of terror, there is going to be great distress upon the nations and great persecution on the saints of God. The third source of pressure will be actually the fruit of man's evil activity, man's sin, right? The actions of evil people against one another. It is going to come to its highest, greatest degree of evil that the earth would have experienced is going to be experienced in that time. The fourth source of pressure is by convulsion.